Let's talk about this. I wouldn't have a huge problem with it if you wanted to compare Russia, that is post USSR and pre USSR, with the United States and just say both are bad and just kind of throw it away. That's fine. But when we talk about events that occurred during World War II, we can't talk about Russia. We're talking about the USSR. And while we can't say that nothing awful happened there or that they made no mistakes, we can't just lump them in with the United States because that's super misinformed. So the ghettos you refer to in Russia, that took place pre-USSR under the Tsar. And then in 1918, the USSR criminalized anti-Semitism and dissolved the Pale of Settlement. While some anti-Jewish sentiments may have remained amongst some citizens within the USSR, the government itself did not continue any of the ghettos or pogroms started under the Russian Empire. Not only that, they also had Jewish citizens in high ranks in their government. We can say that helping Jewish people wasn't like the absolute utmost top priority of the newly formed Soviet Union, but they obviously were not systematically targeting and oppressing them like the German regime was doing. On top of this, the USSR was vocal about the rising danger of spreading fascism through Mustache Man and his party in Germany. They even tried to form an alliance with the West in the 30s, which the West declined and went on to appease Germany through the Munich Agreement in 1938. Back to the topic of Jewish people, though. Not only was it not the USSR that started the literal Holocaust, but it was also Germany that invaded the USSR in 1941, which led to the mass unaliving of Soviet Jews that otherwise would not have been targeted. Let's also talk about and give props to the nation that was most vital and responsible for defeating German fascism during World War II. Once again, the USSR. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The USSR is responsible for 80% of German casualties during the war. The Red Army liberated Auschwitz, Treblinka, among other camps. Now let's consider a little hypothetical. If the Red Army had not been as strong and would have collapsed perhaps a year after being invaded in 1941, the German fascist movement would have gone on to dominate Europe indefinitely. Not only would the Germans not have lost nearly as many soldiers, they also would have been able to overtake Soviet oil fields, powering their military machine to take over even more land, and then D-Day would have undoubtedly failed. My point is, without the USSR, millions more Jews would have suffered and perished, and the US would not have been able to take its little victory lap so easily. The West would have needed to allocate 3 to 4 times more men and resources at the very least to try and stop Germany and the Axis powers. Another reason that we cannot equate the US with the USSR is that immediately after the war, the United States began rehabilitating German fascists. The USSR may have struggled with anti-Semitism and prejudice within its society, but not to the point of literally bringing in German war generals and scientists to work in high positions within the CIA, NASA, and NATO. Instead, the Soviets went on to persecute, jail, or even execute some of these German fascists. The US chose the strategy of rehabilitation in order to fortify itself against its new enemy post-war. Meanwhile, the Soviets were focused on societal progress and technological advancement for the betterment of its people and the people all around the globe. The US was only focused on global dominance, setting up the World Bank, the IMF, NATO, etc. The Soviets had flaws, but equating them with the US, who empowered fascists to maintain global dominance, is ahistoric.